Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us with Forge Online for today's service. My name's Steve. I'm one of the leaders here at the Forge. We are carrying on our series, which is entitled, If I Could Tell You Just One Thing. And it's based on this book by a guy called Richard Reed. Now, Richard Reed is the founder or one co-founder of Innocent Drinks. And he said that there were 3 bits of advice that had changed his life forever. And so he made a kind of a commitment that whenever he met someone remarkable, he would ask them what their one bit of advice would be. And so that's what we've based this series on, with Ben Lasky speaking in a short while's time. Let me just very quickly tell you, Bill Clinton, the old US president, Richard Reed had 8 days with him going in 8 different countries in Africa. And he said it was just an extraordinary time as Bill Clinton just made time for everyone. And when he asked him for his one bit of advice, this is what Bill Clinton said. He said, one of the most important things is to see people. The person who opens the door for you, the person who pours your coffee. He says, acknowledge them and show them respect. He modeled that, and it's a great bit of advice. I wonder what Ben is going to bring to us today with his bit of advice for us.
So yeah, if you don't know, my name is Ben, and I lead up some of the creative stuff here at the Forge, which includes the music and some of the social media and stuff like that, and I feel really, really lucky to be a part of this team, and it always makes me emotional to see these guys up here, but also for those that aren't on, just being in the front here and still pursuing God, even when they're not on stage, is what it's all about, isn't it? So we're really, really, really blessed as a church. That's not even what I'm talking about today, is it? So I should get on with it. If I could tell you just one thing, it's hard, isn't it? It got me thinking, actually, about my granddad. I don't know if you've got a granddad, but he could have written that book, with just these one-liners. He used to say to me, we used to sit in the same corner of the garden in his house, and he would sit there. We would sit literally for hours, and he would tell me these pearls of wisdom, some of which I have no idea to this day what they mean. I'm going to share some with you now, and if you're watching online, hello and welcome to you. Let me know in the comments if you agree with any of these or know what any of these mean. I think the first one you'll get, never eat yellow snow. Top advice. When I told that to Steve, he said, are you taking the pee? Yeah, I groaned too. Then he said, never do anything I wouldn't do, which gave me a license to do anything, because this guy is a rebel. And then he said, whatever you do, don't. And then this is a wise one. If things don't alter, they'll stay as they are. And then lastly, he'd say this so sweetly, he'd say, his heart's in the right place, but his head isn't. So what's the one thing I'm going to tell you? I'm not going to expand on any of those points, but I feel like those examples, along with Steve's little book, I feel like I've given you enough just for the band to come back up now. But no, I'm going to keep going for another 20 minutes or so. But I want to speak in something that's a little bit personal to me, actually, and something that I'm really working through. So please don't see this as someone that's got stuff sorted up here. Never, ever think that for anyone at the Forge, especially when Steve's speaking. But this isn't something that I've got sorted, but something that I'm working through and want to work through together. I struggle with imposter syndrome. Sometimes I feel suffocated by my lack of skills, that it leads me to a lack of action. And that's the one thing I want to delve into today and talk a little bit about. But first, I want to expand on the gospel according to Star Wars. I was going to use a cricket analogy, but I know that you get enough of those from a certain other speaker here at the Forge, and even nearly one this morning. So I'm going to do Star Wars. So bear with me if you can. I'm really going to try and make this easy, but I am a bit of a nerd. But in the first film, which is actually the fourth film, which is actually now the fourth of the, Anyway, in the first film that was made, we meet a young Luke Skywalker. And at the end of the film, he is tasked with destroying this thing called the Death Star by shooting 2 torpedoes into its exhaust vent. Okay, are you with me so far? So he has to fly along this Death Star, which, for those of you that don't know, is basically a gun as big as a moon. And Luke's job is to save the galaxy by using this computer that he has here, called a navigation computer, driving along the surface of the Death Star and shooting 2 torpedoes into a hole that's just a bit of a fragility in the structure that will explode the Death Star. Now, the problem was, Luke wasn't equipped for the task. In fact, he was just a moisture farmer from Tatooine. Those moisture farmers, eh? I don't think even in Suffolk we know what a moisture farmer is. But the difference between Luke and everyone else, he's the last man standing when it comes to this mission, is that he has the Force. And as Luke goes down along the surface of the Death Star, he can hear the words of his master speaking to him, "Use the Force, Luke." He can hear his master from beyond the grave saying, "Trust your instincts. Let go." So Luke actually puts his navigating computer away, shuts his eyes, trusts in the Force, and I don't have to tell you the ending, because there's another 15 films that I would highly recommend you watch. But it looked a little something like this. That's the Death Star. There you go. Now, one of the issues, there are many issues, but one of the issues with Star Wars is that it is not real. But I can relate to Luke, and if I was Luke, you sure as hell I would not be putting away my navigation computer. I would not even be getting in the X-Wing. I wonder if Luke felt underqualified. I wonder if he felt like an imposter. I wonder if he thought to himself, sorry, I'm just a moisture farmer. Sorry, I haven't been shown how to do this. There's no way you should trust me with something that is this important. Now, that's a bit of fun, but we do all fall into this trap, don't we? Of feeling underqualified or thinking, if people really knew how little I knew, there's no way they would trust me with this or respect me with this. We have this perception of everything needing to be sorted, everything needed to be lined up perfectly, to go on that course, to complete that training. Then, only then will I do what needs to be done. But actually, all that ends up happening is that we get trapped up waiting for everything to be sorted that we never actually start. We never actually do what needs to be done because we're so trapped by a fear of failure or a lack of clarity or even just a lack of belief. And we're not unique in feeling like this. This isn't a new problem. We find it in the Bible. Look at Moses, for example. He's pretty famous. If it's your first time in church, I'm sure you will have heard of Moses. He's so famous that we named a basket after him. He has a fascinating story, which I really do not have time to go into. But the arc of the story is that Moses is called to lead God's people out of oppression and out of slavery in Egypt into the promised land. Now, at this stage of the story where we're going to pick it up, Moses has fled Egypt after killing an Egyptian for beating a Hebrew slave, because Moses was a Hebrew, so that offended him a lot. He's tending the fields of his father-in-law when God appears to him in the form of a burning bush. And they have this crazy exchange where God calls out to Moses from the flames, but the bush never burns. God calls Moses to lead his people out of slavery. And again, I would encourage you to read it in full, but I just don't have the time. And this is what Moses says in response to God telling him to lead his people out of Egypt. Moses raised another objection to God. Moses raised another objection to God. That makes me think there's a long list of objections. Master, please, I don't talk well. I've never been good with words, neither before nor after you spoke to me. I stutter and stammer. Moses goes straight in with the excuses. He goes on to say, God says, and who do you think made the human mouth? And who makes some mute, some deaf, some sighted, some blind? Isn't it I, God? So get going. I'll be right there with you, with your mouth. I'll be right there to teach you what to say. God is saying, if you go, I've got you. I'll give you the words. I'll give you the answers. I'll give you the influence. Moses responds, oh, Master, please send somebody else. And I wonder how many of us have had that conversation with God. God, please send somebody else. Please send somebody else to help that homeless person that I just walked past on the street. I can't do it. I can't talk to that colleague that is interested in faith because she might think I'm a weirdo if I say I'm a Christian. I can't pray for healing for that sick person in case it doesn't happen. I'm not good enough to do this. I'm not strong enough to face this. I can't call myself a Christian. I've got too many issues. I've got too many insecurities. I've got too many undealt bits of sin and dark things in my life. God, please just call someone else. Later, God has to repeat his instructions to Moses in chapter 6. God addressed Moses saying, I am God, tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, everything I say to you. Moses answered again, look at me, I stutter. Why would Pharaoh listen to me? Moses is saying, I'm not up to the task. I'm not equipped for this mission. I'm not equipped for this role. It moves on, chapter 7. God told Moses, look at me and I'll make you a god to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. If you are to speak everything I command you, and your brother Aaron will tell Pharaoh. So, Moses is an orphan and a murderer with a speech impediment. He's absolutely crippled by fear but he won't be able to say the right thing, do the right thing, have the right influence. He's going to be laughed out of the room. He felt like an imposter. He felt like a fraud. He felt like a nobody. But God had a plan. He gave him Aaron to speak for him. And this is the thing, is that if you are obedient to God, he will put the people around you to support you and guide you. And Moses went on to do incredible things and even wrote much of the Old Testament. You see, God doesn't use perfect people. He calls us to live by faith and not by sight. And that's in 2 Corinthians. So this is the one thing I want to tell you this morning. God doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called. God doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called. He chooses the meek and the lowly. Just look at the disciples of Jesus. I'm going to pluck 3 out. We've got a tax collector in Matthew. We've got a fisherman with a serious anger problem in Simon Peter. We've got a religious extremist in Simon the Zealot, just to name a few. God chooses the meek and the lowly. And here's a key change in our thinking that I think once we grasp, we'll start to get this. When Jesus calls people, he doesn't call them to anything other than to just follow him. He says, follow me, and then he says, I'll make you. But the first instruction is to follow me. I think we get trapped in wondering what God's ultimate will and purpose is for our lives, thinking that we have to sell everything that we own, move to some foreign country where Christians are persecuted and hand out Bibles and live in a cave and, eat locusts and stuff like that. But no, Jesus' invitation to us is simply to follow him. Emma spoke about this last week, and again, like Steve said, I would encourage you to catch up if you can, but following Jesus simply means fixing your eyes on him. Emma called it stepping out of the boat. She used the story of Peter, one of Jesus' disciples, walking on the water to meet Jesus on the Sea of Galilee. Following Jesus means leading a life that honors his teaching and his character. Following Jesus means opening up your heart and your soul to accept the sacrifice he made for you. It really is that easy. And continuously seek his will in your life, leaning on him to give you wisdom, strength, and determination. Make your priority following Jesus, because he is the way and the truth and the life. That's why our mission as a church is to help people find and follow Jesus, because nothing is more important. Because when you just follow, God does the rest. When we are obedient, God does the rest. When we surrender, God does the rest. When we are weak, he is strong. When we are anxious, he is peace. When we are confused, he is wisdom. Take this story, for example, again, if you've never ever been to church before, I'm sure you'll have heard this one as well. But it's recorded in all 4 Gospels of the Bible, which kind of proves its legitimacy historically, which is quite amazing. John 6 says, when Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming towards him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. I find that hilarious. In fact, I almost imagine Jesus smirking as he says this. "Philip, there's a lot of hungry people here, mate. How do you reckon they're going to all eat? Do you reckon they're going to start kicking off when they haven't got any dinner?" Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Half a year's wages. Apparently, the average salary in the UK is 33k. So let's round that up to 17k in today's money for a bite of bread each. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. How far will they go among so many? Andrew pops up and says, "Look, there's a kid over here with his lunchbox. But have you seen how many people there are here? What do you think that's going to do?" And then Jesus goes on and says, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. Just imagine what that would have looked like. 5,000 men. Some argue maybe 15,000 with women and children too. The world's largest picnic with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. When they all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. You see, God doesn't just give you what you need. He gives you so much more. There is enough and leftovers. God takes what is seemingly impossible and makes it possible. He blows our expectations out of the water and gives us more than we could ever ask or think or imagine. Which leads us to us. What can we offer? What are our 5 loaves? What's in our lunchbox? Just imagine what God can do through the people in this room, if we just decide to trust, if we decide not to be held captive by our worries and our doubts, our imposter syndrome, and instead say, "You know what, God, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I felt like you calling me here. I felt a nudge from you here. I'm just going to live by faith and not by sight and see what happens. I've only got my lunchbox, God. I don't have enough to feed this many people. I don't have what it takes. This is all I've got." No. With God, you have so much more. You have enough to feed everyone with leftovers. Because with God, anything is possible. With God, things that are ordinary become extraordinary. Because with God, things that seem out of reach suddenly become achievable. Hand over your lunchbox and live by faith, not by sight. God is not calling you because you're equipped. He's calling you and will equip you. And God is using people all over this place to do extraordinary things. My mate Steve, who's sitting over there. Sorry, Steve, didn't warn you. Hello, Steve. Steve hasn't got a degree. He hasn't got a ton of money to go on training. He hasn't even got 10 full fingers. That's a story for another time, eh? But what he's doing, he just gave up a 25-year career in farming. He's a prime example of saying, God, I don't have much, but everything I have is yours. And now the guy is making a monumental impact on the lives of young people, not only in this country by running a care farm, but internationally. You're my hero, Steve. Because God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. Or take someone like my wife, who's totally the opposite to Steve, thank God. I love Steve, but not in that way. She's totally opposite to Steve. She's totally qualified. She's got a first or something. Is that what they call them in university, Bo? A first, whatever that means. She's amazing. But she laid it all down because she felt like God called her to something else. Some of you know that our journey, we are now foster carers, and our journey has been a huge leap of faith for us. So my wife, Kat, who has this incredible degree, and she gave up a senior management position in a company because we felt like this is what God has called us to do. It was totally unknown, but we felt the call from God. And when we applied to be foster carers, when we made that first step, we didn't even have a house that would let us proceed with our application because we didn't have enough bedrooms. But God provided a house, because that's what God does. He is our provider. He is our helper. He goes before us. He stands beside us. And if he is with us, who can be against us? God doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called. God's dream for us isn't to do, it's just to follow him. Everyone Jesus picked and chose was meek, humble, and lowly. Jesus only ever calls us to himself, come follow me. The invitation is to follow him. That has to be our number one priority. The calling isn't to worship leading, or to serve on this team, or to give this amount. The call is to follow him, because he is the way, the truth, and the life. And if we truly follow Jesus, our perspective on everything changes. Our plans become his plans. Our dreams become his dreams. The things that we thought were rewarding are no longer rewarding. Our mission becomes his mission. What would happen if everyone in this room took that step? It doesn't have to feel big, and I hate talking about money. I hate talking about money at home. I hate talking about money with my family. I hate talking about money with my friends, and I especially hate talking about money in church. But here we go. We had a meeting as a staff team a couple of weeks ago, and just about our financial situation, and we got some figures together. And the data shows that 28% of our church do not give, which surprised me. And I don't want to make anyone feel bad. There's a cost of living crisis, and people serve tirelessly and generously in so many ways. That's not what this is about. But I think I know one of the reasons why people can't or don't feel that they can give, because we don't know where to start. We think, I can't all of a sudden start giving 10% of my income to the Forge, or I have to pay for this, and then maybe once I've paid for this, then maybe I can sort it out. But is that what living by faith looks like? Or does it look like donating £10 on our little machine over there instead of going to Costa this week, or Weatherspoons? Or does it look like just giving 1% of your income in the hope or the faith to increase it later? You don't have to have it all figured out, but we do need to start. That's what faith is. Not having all the answers, but trusting in something bigger. It's not all about money. It's about that job you've always wanted to pursue, but you're not sure if the salary is going to work. Live by faith and not by sight. Or what about that charity that you've always wanted to volunteer for, but this year wasn't a good year, and neither was last year, and neither was the year before that? Live by faith and not by sight. Or what about that mission trip that you've always wanted to go on? You've wanted to sign up for, but you're not sure if your boss will let you have the time off. You're not sure if you're going to be able to afford it. You're not sure how your family is going to cope without you. Live by faith and not by sight. And this is relevant in our lives. My wife, Kat, who was singing up here earlier and did an amazing job, she has a heart for young people who are marginalised by society, which is why we got into our fostering journey, but especially those with physical learning disabilities. We were teenagers when we first visited a project out in Romania. They provide a home for life for children, for end-of-life children with high physical and mental disabilities. They work with Roma communities, gypsy communities in Romania, and they're not even classed as citizens in Romania, the Roma community. And they provided Romania's first palliative care system for end-of-life children. So it's an amazing charity, amazing people. And we fell in love with it. So we ended up visiting most years, and Kat even did a micro gap year with them. And over time, as a family, we have 2 young biological children. We moved church, and that relationship just drifted, and we ended up being less and less involved until about 2 years ago, where Kat spoke to me and she really felt called to invest her skills into that charity again, in whatever capacity that looked like. So she set up a call with the charity manager. They were delighted to hear from her, and she began the process of becoming a trustee and was invited to join a trip later on that year. Financially, that was totally unachievable for us. Totally unachievable for us. We did not have the money. We did not see a way of the money coming in. But we prayed and we said, God, if this is right, we trust you to make a way. We prayed and we did feel like it was right to say yes to the trip. That very same day, I got an email from Neil, who's in charge of the finances here at the Forge. Someone had made a donation to me through the church bank account for the exact amount of the trip. Now, that's an amazing testimony for us, because you were able to go on that trip and planning on going out again very soon, and it's made a real big impact for us. But what about that person that gave? I wonder that, they'll never know the impact of their gift. They'll never know this story unless you're sitting in the room right now. But I wonder if they felt, God, I can't do it this month. Can I do it next month? Or, God, is that really the amount that you want me to give? Because that's a big risk. Or I don't really know if I can afford that. But they were so faithful to God and to God's calling. And that's what living by faith and not by sight looks like. Because his ways are higher than our ways. His plans are greater than our plans. He is the way, the truth, and the life. So step out. Step out. Sign up. Stand up. Speak out. You won't feel ready. You definitely won't see the whole picture. You won't know the full plan. But we believe in a God who knows, who provides, who cares. All we have to do is trust him. Trust him when it's good, trust him when it's bad. And just because it's God's will and God's plan for your life doesn't mean the road is straight. It doesn't mean the road is easy. And it doesn't mean there will not be bumps and turns and twists and doubt. But God doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called. He's marked you for something greater. He's got a plan to prosper you and not to harm you. He'll give you everything you need to fulfill his calling, to walk his path. All we need to do is step out in faith. So what is next for you? Maybe God's just put something on your heart right now. How are you going to live by faith? What areas of your life do you feel completely stuck because you're waiting to have all of your questions answered before you take a step out of the boat. Where do you feel called to but unequipped to go? So I'd love for you to stand. We're going to sing again in a second. But I wonder if we could just create just a moment. Yeah, please do stand. Please do stand. You were listening to me. Let's just create just a moment right now. And maybe you've never done this before, and that's totally okay. But I encourage you to shut your eyes and open out your hands. It's always good to open out your hands when you're receiving a gift. Father God, will you speak to us right now? Will you highlight areas in our lives where we are totally stuck? Will you highlight areas to us where we need to increase our faith, increase our action? And God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for where I have not taken that step, where I have felt a nudge, a call to do something, and I've been too scared, or I've been too filled with doubt and insecurity to pursue what you have for me. I'm sorry, Lord. I pray for each person in this room to have a unique and fresh insight into your calling over their lives. God, I pray for encouragement for those that feel that they have heard from you, but just feel discouraged along that road, that you would just give them a confirmation right now. Maybe this would be the confirmation they need to keep carrying the flag, to keep their eyes fixed on you and not look at the stormy waters around. Thank you, Jesus, that you will equip us. You will carry us. Your arms are strong enough to carry us. You have been faithful. You have been good. You have been true. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. For the Lord your God is with you. He is standing beside you. You are the strength within my soul, Lord. My strength and my hope. Thank you, Lord.
Hey, thanks so much to the band, but also thank you to Ben and thank you to you for watching. Just before we go, I don't want to bring Ben in. Ben, loved what you had to say today. Thank you. Just very quickly, in one sentence, the one bit of advice or the one bit of information that you would want to tell people is?
God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called.
Fantastic. And just very quickly, it's a good phrase. It's a good phrase.
Hopefully.
What do you mean, though, by being called?
Yeah, so I believe that that God has a plan and a purpose for everyone, especially you watching this stream, and that he calls us to something, to his mission, to his path. And if we submit ourselves to God and to his will and following him, which I went into in my talk, then you can live in his calling. And we can be trapped by this idea of not feeling good enough or not having things in order to pursue his calling and his purpose for our lives. But God will actually give us everything that we need if we just follow him.
Boom, sorted. What a wise boy. Hey, thank you for joining. I hope you have a great week. Please do join us next week as we carry on our series with another small bit of advice for you. Take care. Have a great week.